U.S. history is brought to you today by Ozark. Ozark, natural sparkling spring water with a pomegranate lemonade taste.
And that announcer voice you hear is my wonderful brother, Rydell Walthall. He goes to UT, and I'll let him tell you guys about his. He has a degree in civil engineering, but the economics degree. Go ahead and tell my class.
I almost got an economics degree.
One Spanish
Y-
class short.
Yeah, I needed one more Spanish class.
So, guys, listen up. Don't neglect your fine arts or your language requirements. You'll be short a whole degree. All right. Anyway, so we're gonna talk today with my brother's vast experience in economics. We're gonna start off with mercantilism, which you guys already know is when the mother country in this colonial time was trying to reap a profit from its colonies. And it's going to do this by regulating the trade of the colonies. So this gets into triangular trade, or like we talked about. Now, there was a debate, remember in class, guys, if it was a quadrilateral trade or other strange shapes. But my mathematician buddy over here, he's here to tell you the one student that said, what was it?
I mean,
It's
technically,
it's a weird looking rectangle.
which is a quadrilateral.
Okay, all right. But what was the rhomba thing? What's a rhomba?
Well, it's rhombus if
Wait, is that a
it's
dance?
rhomba is I think a dance.
Wait, but I thought it was also a shape.
Rhombus is a shape.
Oh, okay. Well, what's that?
It's like a diamond.
Then that's totally not what we're talking about. Okay, so quadrilateral, they were right.
Yeah.
You guys are awesome at math. Kudos to y'all. I'm sorry for doubting. Okay. So anyway, this gets us into that. And remember, we're talking about this triangular trade, which is actually more of a weird rectangle between the American colonies on the East Coast. You have Europe, you have the west coast of Africa, and then you also have the West Indies as well. And so here, let's go to the map. In this trade, recall that in England's ideal scenario, applying mercantilism, they want the colonies to be making raw materials like from New England, fish, lumber. From the middle colonies, you'd have tobacco, you'd have indigo. Eventually, from the southern colonies, you'd have like rice, cotton. They want these raw materials shipped over to the mother country, over to England.
I think it's important to also remember this is not unique to England because so you can draw a different quadrilateral for France or for Spain with their colonies.
Well, see, France's would look more like an actual rectangle because they have to go all the way up to the St. Lawrence, right?
Depends on the map projection you use.
Okay. All right. And then in England, they are wanting to make manufactured products out of those raw materials. So out of the wood and iron they would be getting from the colonies, they would make like a shovel or a gun. I guess you probably need other things for a gun, but simplified. There you go. And keep in mind that the navigation laws that we talked about are going to enforce this to varying degrees of success. Obviously, this is really difficult to make sure that every ship that the colonies are sending across the Atlantic back to the mother country is on an actual British ship. It's difficult to enforce that people back in the colonies aren't making stuff. England tries to. They passed like a hat act in the 1700s where it was illegal to make a hat in the colonies. They pass, all kinds of laws like that that made it illegal to manufacture. But of course, people were. And you also have smuggling. Smuggling became rampant and was actually a very successful, pretty prestigious profession in the colonies. Smuggling goods against the English laws of the day was that's how much they were getting by with this. Now, from England, from the manufactured goods, those would be sent back. You see how this makes this a lot more complicated than that triangular trade you were taught, I guess, back in middle school or something, because those manufactured goods are being sold back to the colonies. That's an important part of England's mercantilist ideas, is that this is a guaranteed market for their goods. Now, they were selling it also everywhere in the world, but this guaranteed them a place to sell those goods. And then they're also shipping products over to West Africa for the slave trade. Now, there were other West African products, but the main one is going to be slaves. And those slaves, primarily, they're going to the West Indies. You mentioned some horrifying details there.
Well, West Indies had something like 95% mortality among slaves, and the vast majority of the slaves crossing the Atlantic were going there to replenish the dead,
Yeah, and remember guys, the main product in the West Indies is going to be that sweet glorious sugar, and
which is
sugar
backbreaking to produce, particularly in that time.
extremely labor intensive. So the slaves were dropping at a very alarming rate there.
Also, tropical diseases.
Tropical diseases as well. Yeah, quinine won't be created until like after the Spanish American War, way on until like 1898 or afterward, actually. Now, so the slaves that are going to make it to the colonial area, a lot of them actually came from the West Indies. Of course, some from West Africa, but most of them just came up this way from the West Indies to the southern and the Chesapeake and the middle colonies there, and very few to New England. So this is our trade, and this is the scenario that England has envisioned to reap maximum profit from her colonies. Now, don't think that this is like punishment for everybody in the colonies, though. If you're a planter down in the Chesapeake, like in Virginia, this actually works really well for you. You have a guaranteed market for all of the tobacco that you're growing, which is great. I mean, for a farmer, that's ideal. Um, Growing the rice down in the Carolinas, like this was a sweet setup, and they were making some hardcore money.
It's also worth noting that the colonists in the Carolinas and in Virginia had much stronger political ties back with England than the colonists in New England.
That's a really good point. Yeah, like during the English Civil War, these were the royalists, these were the Cavaliers, um, who were very upset when King Charles the First had his head cut off. And so, yeah, that they have a closer tie there. Now that brings us to New England. They're not making raw materials. Remember the soil up in New England, the climate, it's not as good for growing. They don't have as big a source of cheap labor. They don't need it because they're not growing. And so this really was creating a problem for them.
One of the largest fisheries in the history of the world, but I mean, fish doesn't really do well when it's shipped across the Atlantic in a
Yeah,
sailing boat.
especially before they had like refrigerators and stuff. That would have been pretty smelly. So yeah, there's some in the American colonies that are going to benefit greatly from this, and then mostly those in New England, they're the ones that are going to be hurt by this. Now, over in England, keep in mind that they also had laws imposed on them to maximize profits. Like in England, it was illegal to grow tobacco; they could only get it like from the colonies. And so it worked both ways. And it's not just England being big, bad, whatever. They were very proud of their colonies. And a lot of the colonists felt the same way. They felt like they were part of this great empire, all working together for the common good. So it's not quite the sour relationship that we're going to be getting into like in the mid 1700s and after that. So we talked about these. Remember, big points with the navigation laws. We're talking about maximizing the trade benefit for mercantilism. We're talking about how only goods could be sent on English ships, and you're going to have certain laws making it illegal to grow certain things in certain places or manufacture certain goods like in the American colonies. That's all under what we call the navigation laws or the navigation acts. It's the beginning of the taxes that are eventually going to lead to the American Revolution. And here you go. Should I try to do my English accent?
You can certainly try.
It's so bad. All right. Don't export don't export any hats, woolens, or iron since these things are already made in England. Colonies. You can't export anything except in English or colonial ships, I say. Send that tobacco over to England. Okay? There's England taxes. He's got a big tax paper sign. Taxes. Okay? Take that cargo to England to be taxed before you land it in the colonies. Do you think that's what they sounded like back then?
No one knows for sure, but uh, they sounded different. Like the English accent that you hear today didn't exist, just like the American accent you hear today didn't exist. They colonists and the English sounded the same, and they both spoke a dialect of the English language, which has gone by the wayside. But and also a lot of vowels made different sounds back then. It was during a period of transition that we call the Great Vowel Shift.
I blame Shakespeare.
Everyone does.
So like an A was different.
Cat is cot.
My cot escaped. What, you can't sleep, mate? No, my cot escaped. All right, I'll just stop. All right, that's for you guys for later during class. Good luck. All right. A glorious revolution. That sounds really nice, doesn't it? Like
And it's a lot better than
a
most revolutions.
a bloody revolution. So this would imply that it's a bloodless revolution, would you say?
It's one of the things it's called, and I mean, it's relatively. I mean, there was still blood.
Wait. When was their death?
And they landed with like over 400 ships and 14,000 troops.
Yeah, William like made a show, but like he's just like, "What's up, England? Y'all invited me. I'm here, yo." And
And
then
I think there was a lot more death from like the Jacobites arose almost immediately um, in response to
I
this.
guess we have to count the Jacobites, don't we?
I mean, they were people.
Okay, fine. All right. So, an almost bloodless revolution. That is our glorious revolution of 1688, 100 years after the Spanish Armada's defeat. Okay. So the English monarchy situation, guys. If you are following along and you like your Kate and William news and all of that stuff, and Harry and Meghan Markle, so here you go. Remember that King Charles I, he gets his head lopped off in the English Civil War in 1649. So he's gone. Then you have Oliver Cromwell, leading Parliament, the Roundheads, and then becoming Lord Protectorate, and that wasn't cool. And then eventually dying of natural causes. Oh, and what happened after his death?
So this is something that you can strive for. They hated him so much that years after his death, well, 2 years after his death, they exhumed his body from Westminster Abbey so that they could hang it in chains and behead the corpse.
Yeah, Oliver Cromwell. There's a lot of strong feelings in England about Oliver Cromwell. It's his statue, by the way. It's right outside Westminster Abbey today.
Outside of the House of Commons, not
Well,
surprisingly.
I mean, that's right behind Westminster Abbey.
Yeah, but he's not going to be by the House of Lords. They have Richard on that
Wait,
side.
which side is the House of Commons? Which side is the House of Lords? I don't know because I just know the building, like Parliament. Which side is which?
If you see Cromwell, that's the Commons side. If you
So
see,
like Victoria Tower is Commons side, Big Ben is Lords.
I'm not
Whoops,
sure.
sorry guys, I get excited thinking about Big Ben. Ding, 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 ding.
But yeah, he's not going to be on the House of Lords sides. They hate him
Yeah,
with a passion.
yeah. So Oliver Cromwell is gone, suffice to say, and then remember we have the restoration of the monarchy, and that's going to usher in all of those repayments from Charles II. He's grateful to be brought back and to pay off his debts. He's going to give a lot of land grants. That's where you get like William Penn getting Pennsylvania and all of that, and Delaware. And so the middle colonies are really formed after the restoration of the monarchy. Well, Charles II's brother, after he goes, his brother is James II. And we've already mentioned James II. He was previously, before he became king and was coronated with that name, he was known as the Duke of York. And it's his forces that are going to forcibly, but not too bloody, take over New Amsterdam from the Dutch. Hence why that colony gets the moniker New York.
Didn't they legally buy it?
No, the English forcibly took it. No, the Dutch legally bought it from the Native
Ah,
Americans
right.
for 60 guilders, which you're trying to look up conversion rates, right? You're always looking up conversion rates. 60 guilders, there's a bit of a debate on what that would be today because it's hard, like you saw in the 1600s, to convert like what it would be
Oh,
in today's money.
it's hard converting $1970 to today.
All right, well, here's the discrepancy to really give you a headache. 60 guilders could either be something like $24 today, or it could be like 15,000.
Either way, that's a bargain for Manhattan.
Right. That's what we should remember. That there was a bargain, and the natives really got gypped. So there you go. But anyway, this is the Duke of York, James II. He's now in charge, and remember, he's been dealing with the colonies for a while before even becoming king. So he's highly invested in like trying to more tightly enforce the Navigation Acts and really get more of a profit going from his colonies. So he's going to be trying to raise taxes and mostly like just enforce those laws because you had so many smugglers and other colonists that were getting around the navigation acts, manufacturing their own goods, trading extensively with the French or with the Dutch Empire, and really doing it without punishments. So he's trying
Our
to get
ancestor
after them.
owned a mill. I bet they were manufacturing stuff they weren't supposed to.
True story. So that is where James II is going to really tick off a lot of colonists by forming the Dominion of New England in the 1680s. And this Dominion of New England, it's going to encompass all of the New England colonies we've talked about. So Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Plymouth colony where the Pilgrims were at. And it's also going to include the middle colonies of New York, and New Jersey. Pennsylvania and Delaware are not part of it. Okay, so these are basically all of the colonies that are at all fractious with the king, that have not been following the Navigation Acts because they really don't gain anything from them. So this is leaving alone the Chesapeake, this is leaving alone the southern colonies that are a bit more royalist. Okay.
Worth noting, most of these colonies were founded by people they just wanted to have out of the way. Like, okay, you're Puritans, cool. If you could do that over there, that would be great.
Yeah, these Puritans do not get along with the monarchy. And by the way, James II, also to make it even more fractious, is guess which religion?
Which one are we talking about?
James
James?
II?
Uh, is he? I don't remember. Catholic?
He's Catholic, yes. Okay, so he really is not getting off those Puritans. And so, yeah, for all these reasons, he forms this giant dominion of New England. He kind of wants to model the Spanish system, where authority flowed directly from the monarchy down to like New Spain and to Mexico City and all that. That's what he envisions for the colonies. The authority can now flow directly from London. And he appoints as his official royal governor of this giant new colony, Lord Edmund Andros, who is immediately booed in his stats and incredibly unpopular because he's now trying to enforce these terrible navigation acts on these New Englanders who stand nothing
And
to gain from it.
I think this is, just for context, this is when um, philosophers and whatnot were talking about the divine right of kings, and um, like in France in particular, but also Spain.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, this is getting into John Locke was writing at the end of the 1600s, beginning of the 1700s, right? So this is getting into Enlightenment ideas, right? I think Montesquieu and Rousseau and some of the others come after Locke. Is that right? But this is getting into the Enlightenment era
yeah.
and those ideas about divine right of rule versus popular sovereignty, social contract theories, and those things. Yeah, absolutely. And so James II is seen very much, especially in New England and in other parts of the colonies, as a tyrant, as an absolute monarch who is definitely overreaching. And his ambassador over here, the governor of this dominion, Lord Edmund Andros, is going to do a lot of things to really make the situation even worse. Imposes huge new taxes, in addition to enforcing the Navigation Acts. He's also going to strip the Puritans of their assemblies, basically telling them, these strict Congregationalists, that they can't meet. Um, and taking away any sovereignty, any local rule that they had for the last like what 40, 50 years.
Yeah, sounds pretty bad. So this is the only sidetrack I'll take you on. Why did they not revolt in this time, and what was different about the 1680s versus the 1770s?
It's a really good question. I think the Dominion of New England was just too new and too cumbersome for real enforcement to take place. So Andros he was like way in over his head, right?
Did it also play a role that the colonies were just much less populous at the time?
Yeah, the colonies definitely didn't have as much people either.
Probably a lot more dependent on England for just basic needs.
Yeah, that most of their manufactured goods are coming from England. They're gonna very much suffer from not being able to make their own guns, so that would make revolution an impossibility. Um,
Also, guns at the time were basically a a barrel that you pointed and hoped it didn't explode in your
We
face
talked
too
about the
much.
arquebus, how you had to like
Yeah,
light it and then stuff
it's
it. Like
I
after 5 minutes, it might be ready to
basically
go.
a hand cannon.
Yeah, yeah. This is the late 1600s, so I think we're getting close to muskets and stuff. But yeah, it was still pretty rudimentary. But yeah, the colonies were not ready at this time. They also, you don't have any of the anger really happening in the southern colonies. Keep in mind that a lot of those firebrands of the Revolutionary era, like Patrick Henry, "Give me liberty" or "Give me death," they're from Virginia. At this time, Virginia's like, "Hey, New England, why are you upset? We like the Navigation Acts. We're getting lots of money. We grow our tobacco and they buy our tobacco. It's perfect." And so, yeah, this time there's not going to be any real colonial unity between the South and the North. It would just be New England on her own, which was a big concern at the beginning. Like after the Boston Massacre and stuff, Massachusetts was like, "Hey, other colonies, will you help us out?" And that was a campaign they had to wage, but there would be enough impulsion, I guess, at that point to make it happen. So, good question. All right. So yeah, the colonies do get in line, but then this glorious revolution is going to happen. Because here's the deal: James II, as a practicing Catholic, is he's seen with a lot of suspicion. They just went through all of that episode with, Henry
I mean,
VIII, and
over 100 years of internal strife caused, yeah, over 100 years of internal strife, multiple civil wars. There was the English Civil War, but there was a war before that. Just over 100 years of internal fighting in England because of the issue of will the monarch be a Catholic or a Protestant?
And so here you have with James II, a practicing Catholic on the throne, and Parliament and the English people are willing to tolerate that, but then he has a son, and his son is Christianed and christened in the Catholic faith, and now it looks like you're headed to having a reign, a line of Catholic rulers, one after the other, and it's going to continue. Um,
Not just a Catholic ruler, but maybe a Catholic ruler who's going to say that the Church of England is an an excommunicated part of the Catholic Church and that they should follow the Pope again.
Yeah, and it would do away with all of their history and all of the fighting and death that had happened before over all these religious wars, like with Bloody Mary and then Elizabeth taking back over, and all of that Protestant Catholic fight would come back
It's
up. And
basically a not this again attitude.
yes. So, because this happens after James II's son is born, that's when Parliament is looking around thinking, we got to do something. And they literally will send a letter. They will reach out to James II's nephew, who happened to be married to James II's daughter, Mary. And his nephew's name was William. Again, really creepy, like family bonds here at this time. Or they like to keep everything in the family, that divine right of rule, and all that
I
other
mean,
stuff. A lot of
that that
incest.
that had been going on way back to the Roman period. There's nothing new.
That doesn't make it any less icky for us in modern times to think about. So James II's son is his daughter is married to William, his nephew, and they are in charge of the Dutch Empire, the Netherlands. Parliament reaches out to William and Mary, saying, "Hey, would you guys like to rule England?" And William, being an ambitious leader, says, "Why, yes, I believe I would." William was at the time fighting wars for the Dutch. They had just gotten free from the Spanish. Now they were, I believe, going against the
An 80-year
French.
war.
Yeah, 80-year war against the Spanish, and now they're going against the French. So he greatly would like to have England's assistance. If he was the monarch of England, he'd be able to do a lot more in his wars of conquest. And so he comes in, and James II literally just gives up. He flees England and goes to live down in France. And that's why it's called a bloodless revolution, or the glorious revolution of 1688, because William and Mary, they take the throne. James II gives up and runs to France, and there's not a big war, at least during this event. And since William and Mary, they're from the Netherlands. They're Protestant. William is a Protestant. There are a lot of English people that are breathing a deep sigh of relief, that basically we're no longer going to have a Catholic sitting on the English throne. The other thing is that Parliament, when they reach out to William and Mary, the deal was that Parliament would get to retain more authority than the monarchy. They say, hey, we make you the king. You have to listen to us. At this point, previously, it had been kind of more even stewardship between the king as the chief executive and Parliament as like the legislative body. Parliament sees this as an opportunity to basically have more authority. William obviously doesn't see it that way, so this is going to be an ongoing struggle, but this is the transition
It's the
point.
start of Parliament becoming the main actors. And then also, this ties back to what we mentioned before. There was the vast majority of the of Protestant English breathed a sigh of relief, and there was a significant minority of English Catholics that breathed a cry of revolution.
And in 1689, you get the English Bill of Rights. Let's see if any of this looks familiar. A frequently summoned parliament, so governing body will meet frequently to make the laws of the people. And at this point, Parliament did have its two houses, right? House of Commons and House of Lords. When did that start?
Uh, it had started before this. I don't know when it
Yeah,
started.
so I mean, Parliament is somewhat democratically elected, at least the House of Commons, at least by landowning males at this time, probably. So you'd have an elected body meeting to make the laws of the people frequently, free elections. Members should have a freedom of speech. Does that sound familiar?
A little bit.
Okay. Freedom of speech in Parliament. No armies should be raised in peacetime. No taxes could be levied without the authority of Parliament. Yeah, go ahead.
Worth noting that for England at this time and for over 100 years following this, they would be at war more often than they would be at peace.
It's true. 1700s is poor
And
English soldiers,
if they
right?
weren't fighting the Spanish, then they were probably fighting the French
And
or
if they weren't
fighting the
fighting them, they were
Spanish
fighting their
and the French at
colonists
the same
as
time
they were fighting their colonists.
as they were fighting their
Yeah,
colonists.
there's reasons why we won this war against the empire. Laws should not be dispensed with or suspended without the consent of Parliament. No excessive fines should be imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. What what amendment will that become? I wonder. Could it be?
Seventh,
No, that's something with civil trial, lawsuit, juries, something.
uh, fifth.
Eighth. That's the eighth.
Okay, I was gonna get there eventually.
That's the Eighth Amendment. Freedom of speech. We got the first. Do you see any other amendments? It's almost like, guys, like a
Well,
lot of these
and no taxes levied
ideas.
without the authority of Parliament. That reached not the amendments, but the original
First
Constitution.
article, yeah. It's almost like a lot of English government and laws and rights are going to transfer directly into the new government that we built. We base a lot of it after the mother country. All right, so William and Mary ascend the throne in the Glorious Revolution, and the colonies, they have a big sigh of relief. The Dominion of New England is disbanded. The Puritans are happy briefly, but then remember, this Protestant king is on power. He's not a Puritan. He is going to say that now in the New England colony, they have to allow other Protestants to practice their faith. So Puritan rule comes to an end, I think, by the early 1690s. And it's now a royal colony. And this is about the time, by the way, guys, that the Salem witchcraft trials are happening. Remember, that's also a result of all of this uncertainty and political turmoil. Um, the power of the purse here. Keep in mind that governors in these colonies seem incredibly important and powerful, that they have all of the executive authority for the entire colony, but they don't have as much power as you think because they actually get paid by the colonial assemblies. That's called the power of the purse. And people have to listen to who pays them, like
A lot of these governors were independently wealthy beforehand.
the proprietary. So the Calverts, Maryland, William Penn.
Yeah. So I, I think that varied a lot from colony to colony based on.
But now you have Virginia, since 1624 being a royal colony. You have the proprietors like Anthony Ashley Cooper down there in the Carolinas, I guess. That would be a good example, eventually forming South Carolina. Let's see. Oglethorpe down in Georgia.
And I mean Delaware and Delaware.
So we're mainly talking about New England here, okay? And they
Seems
get
to be a
taken over.
theme.
Yeah, they seem to be the troublemakers, and also with most of the smuggling that was happening. And yeah, the circumventing of the navigation acts becomes so infamous. Like I said, smuggling becomes a very esteemed profession in the colonies. That's how a lot of people were making a lot of money. This is the period that we call salutary neglect, that basically the colonies are just getting around the navigation acts, and England's not really able to enforce them. As like you said, England's fighting all these wars, and they got all this other stuff to deal with. William's attention is very divided because he's now the king of two nations, in effect.
He did
Um,
not speak English, I believe.
is
Well,
that beginning the tradition? When did the Georges take power?
I think there was a
Because they were
monarch.
the first two, like George the Third, the one during the Revolutionary War. He
He
spoke
was
some
he
English,
was the
right?
first one in a while that spoke any
Yeah, because I know
English.
George the First and George the Second were like they were the House of Hamburg, right?
Yeah,
And they spoke in like only German.
or Hanover.
Hannah is one of the others. Great horses over there, by the way. They breed great horses in
Hamburg
Germany.
was a free city, so probably Hanover.
Okay. Yeah, so they only those English kings only spoke German. Yeah, and William, what do you spoken Dutch?
Which at the time
Was
was
it really
a
Dutch?
dialect of German,
Yeah.
High German, because it was at the end of the river.
All right, and the last thing I wanted to discuss with you guys very briefly, because I know we are getting a little bit long on this one, is the John Peter Zenger trial. And this is a case in the early 1700s in New York. It has to deal with freedom of speech. And if you remember that, you're already off to a good start. But basically, John Peter Zenger is a newspaper publisher. Um, at this time, New York is going to have a new royally appointed governor come in, and he's not very popular. And there's going to be a lot of articles published in Zenger's newspaper that are very, how do we delicately put this, rude about the governor, calling him names, and basically even insinuating that he had taken bribes, that he had done some really dirty stuff, and basically what we call today malicious libel. And so the governor, he sues for basically his name being dragged through the mud. This is what libel is. And the colonial court that's going to hear this trial.
Specifically, like just anything published in the paper that's demonstrably false.
Yeah, and normally the way to combat libel is with the truth. But at this time, the truth was what the monarchy said. They made what was truth. And if you went against that, then you were in the wrong. But the colonial trial case here, the colonial court, they actually rule in favor of John Peter Zenger, basically putting the idea of freedom of the press and freedom of the speech ahead of the monarchy, because this was a royally appointed governor, and kind of making this a fundamental value that Americans uphold for good and for bad, right? This freedom of the press idea that newspapers, and at this time, that was the main way to get any news was through the newspaper. They don't have TV, they don't have the internet.
Fitting that it would be enshrined first in New York.
Yeah, yeah, it would. So this is where we get basically why that's going to be part of the First Amendment, this John Peter Zenger trial, and he wins the case against the authority of the monarchy. All right. So now we are done with Unit 1, and we will take the test over it. And I thank you guys for your attention. Do you have any last closing remarks, Rye?
Read about the Great Vowel Shift. It's pretty crazy.
Okay. All right. Bye, guys. Thank you.